I was hospitalized in the ICU. No one came. No one called, just a text from my dad. Send $50,000 for your sister's wedding. I blocked him, cut them off completely, and what happened next shocked everyone. I, 32M, woke up in the ICU with tubes running through my arms and a machine beeping steadily beside me. The fluorescent lights hurt my eyes, and my chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it. A nurse noticed I was awake and came over, asking if I needed anything. I asked what happened. She told me I'd had a massive heart attack 3 days ago. 3 days. I'd been unconscious for 3 entire days, hovering between life and death, and apparently nobody had noticed I was missing from the world. The nurse asked if I wanted her to call anyone. I told her my emergency contacts should have been notified already. She checked her chart and confirmed they had called my father multiple times. He'd acknowledged the calls. My sister was listed too. Also contacted. Also acknowledged. The nurse's expression shifted to something like pity, and I knew immediately what that meant. They knew. They just didn't care enough to show up. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them to distract myself from the crushing weight in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart condition. 27 tiles. I counted them 4 times before my phone buzzed on the side table. The nurse handed it to me, and I saw 43 unread messages. For a split second, something like hope flickered in my chest. Maybe they were all worried messages. Maybe everyone had been trying to reach me. I opened my messages. 38 of them were from my sister, but not one asked how I was doing. They were all photos. Venue options, flower arrangements, dress designs, cake samples. She was getting married in 2 months, and apparently, my near-death experience was less important than her napkin color choices. The other 5 messages were from cousins asking if I was coming to her engagement party last weekend. An event I'd obviously missed while being unconscious in a hospital bed. Then I saw the message from Dad. Just one. Sent this morning. No, how are you? No, are you okay? Nothing. Just 8 words that made my blood pressure spike high enough that the machine started beeping aggressively. The message read, "Send $50,000 for your sister's wedding expenses." I stared at those words until they blurred. The nurse came rushing back, concerned about my vitals, adjusting something on my 4. She asked if I was all right, if the pain was getting worse. I told her I was fine, but we both knew I was lying. $50,000. Not a request. A demand. As if I was an ATM machine, not a son who'd nearly died alone. I'd been the family cash cow for a decade now. After I'd started my software company at 24, suddenly everyone remembered I existed. Before that, I was the disappointment. The kid who didn't want to be a doctor like Dad, who didn't want to follow my sister into law school. I was the dropout, the failure, the one they didn't talk about at dinner parties. Then my app took off. Suddenly, I had value. Suddenly, Dad called every month. Suddenly, my sister needed help with her student loans, her car payment, her apartment deposit. I helped because that's what family does, right? I paid off $60,000 in her loans. I bought Dad a new car when his broke down. I funded my cousin's medical treatment. I sent money for every birthday, every holiday, every emergency. And I never asked for anything back because I thought that's what love looked like. But lying there in that hospital bed, I realized something. I'd been buying their attention, and the moment I stopped being useful, I stopped being worth their time. My near death wasn't worth a phone call, but my bank account was worth a text message. I blocked Dad's number, then my sister's, then my entire family's, one by one, watching each name disappear from my contacts. It felt like cutting anchors loose. The nurse noticed what I was doing and asked if everything was okay with my family. I told her I didn't have family anymore, and for the first time in 3 days, I felt like I could breathe a little easier despite the oxygen tube. I spent 4 more days in the ICU before they moved me to a regular room. My doctor, an older woman with kind eyes, told me the heart attack was stress-induced. My body had literally given out under the weight of everything I'd been carrying. She asked about my support system, about who was helping me recover. I told her I'd figure it out. She looked at me the way the nurse had, with that same uncomfortable pity, but she didn't push. My company's COO visited on day 6. She was the first person who came to see me, and she wasn't even family. She brought flowers and a laptop, joking that I was forbidden from opening it. She'd been handling everything, she said, and the company was fine. She asked what I needed, how she could help. I almost cried. This woman, who I'd hired 3 years ago, cared more about my well-being than anyone who shared my blood. She mentioned that my phone had been ringing in the office. They'd found it in my desk drawer after the ambulance took me. Apparently, people had been calling. I told her I'd changed my number and asked her not to give it to anyone without checking with me first. She understood immediately, didn't ask questions, just nodded and said she'd handle it. I was discharged after 2 weeks with a list of medications, dietary restrictions, and strict orders to reduce stress. I went home to my apartment, which felt both familiar and foreign. Everything was exactly as I'd left it the morning of my heart attack. Coffee mug in the sink. Laptop open on the kitchen counter. Mail piled by the door. It was like walking into a time capsule of the person I used to be, before I'd realized my family didn't actually love me. The first week home was quiet. I worked remotely, took my medications, ate the bland, heart-healthy meals my COO had arranged to be delivered. I slept a lot. I thought even more. And I made a decision. I was done being their emergency fund. Done being the family disappointment who was only valuable when he was writing checks. I started planning my next moves. I contacted my lawyer and had him draft new beneficiary documents. Everything that would have gone to my family now went to various charities and a scholarship fund I established for underprivileged kids interested in tech. I updated my will. I created a trust for my company's shares. I removed my father and sister as emergency contacts from everything, medical, financial, professional. I erased them from my life systematically, the way you delete old files from a computer. 3 weeks after blocking them, my cousin somehow got my new number. She called crying, asking why I'd cut everyone off, saying the family was worried. I asked her which family members had visited me in the hospital. Silence. I asked her which ones had even called to check if I was alive. More silence. Then she mentioned my sister's wedding, how I was ruining it by not contributing, how selfish I was being. I hung up and blocked her too. Update 1. 2 months passed. My health improved steadily. I followed doctor's orders, attended cardiac rehab, started therapy to deal with the emotional aspects of what had happened. My therapist helped me understand that what my family had done was financial abuse mixed with emotional neglect. Hearing it labeled, having someone validate that yes, this was actually messed up, helped more than I'd expected. My sister's wedding was happening this weekend. I knew because my blocked calls list had grown to include 17 family members, all desperately trying to reach me. My assistant mentioned that someone claiming to be my father had shown up at the office building. Security didn't let him up, but he'd caused a scene in the lobby, demanding to see me, shouting about ungrateful sons. The building manager had to threaten police involvement before he left. My lawyer called to inform me that my father had tried to contest my will changes, claiming I was mentally unfit when I'd made them. But since I'd had full medical and psychological evaluations done specifically to prevent this, documented by multiple doctors confirming I was of sound mind, his challenge went nowhere. My lawyer asked if I wanted to pursue harassment charges given the continued contact attempts. I told him not yet, but to document everything. The day of the wedding arrived. I spent it hiking in a state park 2 hours away, phone off, breathing clean air, and feeling more peaceful than I had in years. I didn't think about what dress she wore, or what flowers decorated the venue, or whether Dad gave a touching speech. For the first time in my life, their event wasn't my problem, and that felt revolutionary. When I turned my phone back on that evening, I had 62 missed calls and over 100 text messages from unknown numbers. Apparently, when the $50,000 payment never materialized, they'd had to scale back dramatically. The venue had been downgraded. The catering was limited. There were no fancy favors or elaborate decorations. My sister had a meltdown, from what I pieced together from the angry messages. The wedding still happened, but it wasn't the magazine-worthy event she'd envisioned. Multiple messages blamed me for ruining her special day. Dad sent a message from someone else's phone calling me vindictive and cruel. My aunt told me I'd regret this when I was older and alone. A cousin said I was proving I'd never really been family anyway. I read them all with a strange detachment, like I was reading about someone else's life. Then I deleted every single one. Update 2. For months after my heart attack, I sold my apartment and moved to a different city. Not running away, I told myself. Just starting fresh somewhere without ghosts. I'd been offered a partnership opportunity in a tech firm in Denver, something that excited me professionally and gave me a valid reason to relocate. My therapist thought the change might be healthy. Before I left, my COO, who'd become a genuine friend, asked about my family situation. I gave her the full story over coffee. She listened without judgment, then told me about her own experience cutting off her abusive parents. She said the first year was hardest, that I'd grieved the family I wished I had, not the one I actually had. She was right. I was grieving, but I was also healing. The harassment eventually died down. Apparently, they'd realized I was serious about the cutoff. My lawyer sent a formal cease and desist letter threatening legal action if the contact continued, which finally got through to them. The calls and messages stopped. The silence that followed was initially unsettling, then gradually became comfortable. I threw myself into work and into building an actual support system. I made friends in Denver, people who liked me for who I was, not what I could provide. I dated casually. I joined a hiking group and a book club. I discovered I actually enjoyed cooking when I wasn't stressed. I adopted a dog from a shelter, a 3-year-old mutt who'd been abandoned by his previous family. We were both learning to trust again. About 8 months after cutting contact, I received a letter at my new address. Someone had tracked me down. It was from my sister, handwritten, 6 pages long. I almost threw it away unread, but curiosity won. She apologized for everything. She said she'd been selfish and entitled and had taken me for granted. She claimed she'd done a lot of thinking since the wedding, since I'd disappeared, and she finally understood why I'd left. She wanted to rebuild our relationship, she wrote. She wanted a chance to be a real sister. It was a good apology, as far as apologies go. Specific, remorseful, seemingly genuine. But I'd learned something important over the past months. Good apologies don't erase bad behavior, and I wasn't obligated to accept reconciliation just because someone finally felt guilty. I sat with the letter for a week, rereading it, processing it in therapy. Eventually, I wrote back. A short response. I told her I appreciated the apology, but I wasn't ready to resume contact. Maybe someday, but not now. I needed to protect my peace, and I hoped she could understand that. I didn't hear back, which I chose to interpret positively. Maybe she actually did understand. Update 3. A year and a half after my heart attack, I was thriving. My health was excellent. My cardiologist called me a model patient. The Denver partnership was successful beyond expectations. I was in a serious relationship with someone who thought my worth had nothing to do with my bank account. Life felt full in ways it never had before. Then Dad showed up at my office. Security called me, asking if I wanted them to remove him or let him up. My initial instinct was removal, but something made me agree to see him. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I'd healed enough that seeing him wouldn't shatter me. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer, more tired. He sat across from my desk, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked how I was, and the question was so absurd given everything that I almost laughed. I told him I was alive, no thanks to him. He flinched like I'd hit him. Then he started talking. He explained that when he got the hospital calls, he'd assumed I was fine, that they were overreacting. He said he'd been busy with wedding preparations and figured he'd visit after things settled down. He claimed he didn't realize how serious it was until I'd already cut contact. He insisted he'd tried to reach me to apologize, to check on me, but I'd blocked everyone. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I asked him one question. Why had his first and only message been a demand for money? He didn't have an answer for that. He stumbled over words, tried to explain the timing, the stress, the expenses, but ultimately couldn't justify it. He just said he'd made a mistake, that he was sorry, that he wanted his son back. I told him the truth. The son he wanted back never actually existed. That son was an ATM machine shaped like a person, and I'd retired him permanently. I explained that I'd spent 32 years trying to earn love from people who only valued transactions. I'd nearly died from the stress of it, and in that ICU, surrounded by no one, I'd finally understood that I deserved better than what they'd given me. Dad got emotional. He actually cried, which I'd seen maybe twice in my entire life. He said he understood if I couldn't forgive him, but asked if we could start over, build something real. He promised he'd never ask me for money again, never take me for granted, actually be a father instead of just a name on my birth certificate. It was tempting. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to think people could change, wanted to have a father again. But I'd learned something important over the past year and a half. Wanting something doesn't make it healthy for you. I told him I'd think about it, but I made no promises. I suggested he should probably leave. He nodded, stood up, and before walking out, he said he was proud of me. For the first time in my life, Hearing those words didn't feel like something I needed. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, processing. My girlfriend came by that evening, and I told her everything. She asked what I was going to do. I said I honestly didn't know yet. Maybe eventually I'd be ready for limited contact, maybe not. Either way, I was okay. That was the difference now. Whatever I decided about my family, I'd be okay, because my happiness no longer depended on them. 3 months later, I agreed to coffee with my sister. Just coffee, public place, 1 hour. She'd been in therapy too, she told me, working through her own issues. She didn't make excuses, didn't ask for forgiveness, just wanted me to know she understood what she'd done and why it was wrong. We talked carefully, like strangers learning each other's languages. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't terrible either. I haven't reconciled with Dad yet. Maybe I will eventually, maybe I won't. I'm taking it day by day, protecting my peace, and only letting people into my life who've proven they value me as a person, not a resource. My heart is healthy now. The doctors say I'm doing great. But the real recovery wasn't physical. It was learning that cutting out people who hurt you, even when they're family, isn't cruelty. It's survival. It's choosing yourself when no one else will. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't hurting them back. It's healing yourself, building a life they aren't part of, and being genuinely happy without them. I survived that ICU stay. But more importantly, I survived what came after. And that's the victory they can never take from me.